Hey, welcome to our office. As you can see, we have purchased a laser engraver, but this video isn't about this. It's about something far more pedestrian. We need to exhaust it through our window, and so we've added a temporary board here. This is, of course, going to get painted with exterior grade paint, in case you have that question. But I needed a 4-inch hole. Now, how to cut the 4-inch hole? There's about 111 ways. I wanted to do it on my Shopsmith drill press, so this is how I did it. This is a very old tool. I'm not even sure when this particular model was made. I don't seem to have a date anywhere on it. Very poor instructions available with this type of product, but you can see it has a number of accessories up in the lid, but this is where most of the magic happens. This particular version, and I'm not sure if they still sell these. I need to go take a look on Amazon. I know that most of them today are made with just a form plastic guard, and then the ball bearing is set into that plastic. Well, this one's made of aluminum. It's got an aluminum ring. It's got an aluminum, I don't even know what you want to call that, but a cross piece that has a ball bearing mounted in it, a replaceable ball bearing. And here we have the fly cutter itself, and you can see it's covered the drill bit and the cutter. I'm going to pull those off right now, and this does require a little bit of assembly and adjustment, but before we actually put this into the body of the guard, we would want to make sure that we've got this set to drill the size that we intend to drill. Now in this case, I have a high-speed steel fly cutter installed. Most of these kits come with at least one carbide tipped cutter. I've never used this one, and in the past, when I've used other sets, I didn't like the way that cutter worked, so I stick with the high-speed steel cutter. And in this particular case, what we have here is a really interesting way of locking this in position. There's a little lever, and when you put the lever in here, you can rotate that in the direction where it says open, as you can see. And then if we open that far enough, we disengage the parts that are locking all of this in place. And we can bring that to whatever diameter we want. It's basically measuring off of this shoulder right here. So if you're wanting a 4-inch circle, you would set it for that. And then we rotate that ring to the close position and then tighten it down. Now, I would always double check that to make sure that, in fact, that is the measurement that you are shooting for. So we can do that with a caliper or a rough idea with a tape measure. You can see that's a little bit under from the outside of that cutter to the center of that drill bit. We're a little under 2 inches, and so that accuracy is off a bit. So let's bring that back again, loose enough that we can slide this over. So we drop that lower collar down. That allows the top collar to drop down, and then this part can slide. And then back up. Like I said, horrible instructions, if at all, with these devices. Again, that top washer slides up, and then we rotate this collar in place, following the directions on the top. And then we tighten it down. So this needs to go into the tool, or into the guard, and then, holding that in place, you install the spring, and then this top nut gets screwed in, and it's applying pressure onto that spring. This works kind of like a ginormous VIX bit, in that while you're driving this with your drill press or your hand drill, you then plunge, and it allows that to plunge in that ball bearing. Most of the time you see these being demonstrated on drywall. Years ago, the reason I even have this is we used to use this to make openings in the tops of cabinets to install halogen puck lights. Now that's all been replaced with LED lights, and LEDs, even if you ever use a puck, oftentimes those are surface mounted these days. And so this has kind of gone into retirement. But we were using this to cut particle board and plywood and even solid wood all the time. So let's take a look at how this functions on a drill press. Here's the piece that I want to cut a hole in. I can put this up here and clamp it in place and or brace it against the way tubes so that should this begin to spin the piece, it's not going to come at me like a machete. So I would do a combination of those two things. You might pick the best orientation here based on where we're planning on drilling, to where I actually like that because I'm braced against the back way tube and I'm way out here where I should be able to get plenty of grip with my little clamp. I am sorely missing some big clamps in this shop. I have some clamps over in another shop. Okay. So we're running this at slow speed. If you have a speed reducer, you can run it even slower. But let's just give it a shot. Notice that this guard here is just spinning freely on that bearing. There is a little bit of wobble in this. I tried it in a few different spots on the chuck, and there's just a little bit of wobble, I think, inherent of it being a fly cutter. Mitigated here as it begins to drill. So the pilot bit is in. The guard is now touching the surface as the tip of the fly cutter begins to do its thing. And just take your time here, not so slow that it burns, but not so fast that it tears out. And we're getting very close to our stop. And there we go. And you can see it's actually lifting that core sample right out. In my case, this is what I was after. But if you're making toys for kids, this part right here might be what you're after. In which case, we would take that off from the other side. Also, if what you're looking for is that core, let me show you what you're left with. That cutter leaves a slightly larger diameter because the tip penetrates before the balance of it. So I've in the past double-sided tape. If that had been double stuck from the beginning to substrate, then perhaps that wouldn't have spun. But this is the piece I was after. Pretty slick, eh? I mean, I think so. It works. It works really well. It works faster than it takes to get a router circle jig set up and cutting accurately. And these days, I'm sure these are relatively inexpensive. Now, what is inexpensive? I wouldn't go too cheap. Pay extra careful attention to how is the bearing mounted. If it's just there, if this part is just there to collect dust while you're drilling a hole in the ceiling, that's one thing, and maybe that's all you need. But if you're using this to actually guide the drill in square, look for one that has some form of a metal reinforcement holding that ball bearing. So I look forward to your questions, comments, and cheap shots, and make it a great day.